Okay, students, we are continuing with the introduction lecture to early Black life in the Americas. This is part two, and we begin this section with from a society with slaves to a slave society. The expansion of export agriculture in the colonies, including tobacco, sugar, rice, and cotton, increased the demand for labor, underlining the importance of African slave labor in particular. As the population of Africans increased and slave revolts became more and more common, control of the subjugated workforce became increasingly necessary. Colonists began legalizing restrictive or slave laws, further institutionalizing slavery. As the demand for cash and export crops grew, the need for more labor intensified, resulting in slave traders penetrating deeper into the African interior for slaves. These were no longer Creoles, but interior Africans, less familiar with European culture and not wanted for their intercultural and trading skills, but primarily taken to perform hard labor. African and European slave catchers stole the multitudes of young African men and women, forcing them to march hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles en route to the African West Coast, shackled by neck and under whip and gun. 1 out of every 5 died en route. On the coast, awaiting the journey across the Atlantic, slave traders held their cargo in fortresses or open-air cages, succumbing them to thorough and humiliating examinations and branding. The journey across the Atlantic Ocean is remembered as the Middle Passage, which took anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. On these ships, slave traders jam-packed hundreds of human beings in lower decks like sardines. Chained together in these pits, men and women endured suffocation, beatings, and sickness. In A People's History of the United States, Howard Zinn argues that 10 to 15 million Africans were brought to the Americas. 1 out of 3 to 1 out of 7 died en route to the Americas. Africa lost an estimated 50 million people. Many academics argue that Africa's underdevelopment today is directly connected to the Atlantic slave trade. The young and healthy, including future leaders, intellectuals, skilled laborers, and agricultural producers, were stolen by the multitudes, causing downward spirals in many regions of the African continent. It took an average of 6 months from capture to arrival in the Caribbean, then sold again to colonial buyers in North America. While slavery is remembered as a Southern institution, history cannot absolve the North. Northern bankers, merchants, landlords, and other budding capitalists invested and profited immensely in the slave trade. Northern colonies built slave ships that carried Caribbean rum to Africa in exchange for African slaves, and ship captains used slaves for maritime labor. Northern colonists displayed their wealth with slave coachmen and personal servants, and many held black artisans, farmhands, and domestic servants as slaves. During the 1600s, northern colonies exploited free labor, white and black indentured servants, and black slaves. It was a society with slaves, where your race did not necessarily determine your status as free or enslaved. The South's economy, however, revolved around labor-intensive agriculture, increasing the demand for African slaves. This demand resulted in a growing black population in many regions, dramatically outnumbering whites. Larger plantations had dozens and even hundreds of slaves. By the late 1600s, with the constant fear of slave rebellion, Southern planters gradually began to draw tighter laws around black movement and activities. By the 1700s, colonial repression pushed blacks to the margins of society. In one county at a time, new laws and restrictions banned firearms, interracial marriages, commercial activities, the holding of property, participation in politics, and the right to legally marry or be parents. Blacks could not travel without a pass, and slave status was passed from mother to her children. Colonists nearly stripped Africans of all human status, and the colonial structures regarded African slaves as property. Southern colonies became a slave society, a caste system reserved for those with black skin. These slave laws tipped the balance of power, favoring a numerical white minority, surrounded by those that they physically and psychologically oppressed daily. Slavery was a set of power relationships designed to extract the maximum labor from its victims. The power of law and immediate power of the slave master underlined the necessity of dominance and control. Slave masters forced hard labor and discipline on slaves, with excruciating consequences if the outcome was not desirable. Slave masters induced whipping, burning, mutilation, and death. They also tactfully induced psychological torture daily, creating disunity among slaves by granting privileges to house slaves over field slaves, and routinely broke up families by selling off children and other family members, sometimes to pay off debts, other times to reinforce their power and authority. The numbers are unknown, but white male exploitation of black women in particular was rampant through rape and other forms of sexual coercion. A pacified and subdued slave who simply obeyed orders was the ideal for slave masters. However, under the most difficult conditions and under pain, mutilation, and death, black slaves still rebelled and resisted daily. The early cultural divides between blacks gave way over time to a common experience of laboring in North America, and a shared African American culture emerged. And that culture is rooted in rebellion and resistance. This ranged from passive strategies to the burning of plantations and assassinations of slave masters to open and organized revolt. Slave rebellion underlined the clear inherent contradictions of slavery that lead to its own demise. The profitability of slavery increases the demand for more slaves, which in turn intensifies the oppressive nature of holding people in bondage. This increase in oppression inevitably increases slave resistance and rebellion. In The Apocalypse of Settler Colonialism, Gerald Horne recounts the many African uprisings against European slave traders on the African continent, in places like Gambia and other coastal locations. The moment European slave ships left African shores, Africans plotted and carried out mutiny, killing as many Europeans as they could and many times completely overpowering ship crews, as in the case of Amistad, the most popular account. Slave ship records also reveal Africans jumping off ships and drowning themselves, preferring death over a life of slavery. Black slaves also organized resistance in the form of violent revolts and warfare, more frequent in some parts of the Americas than others. The islands of Barbados, Jamaica, Cuba, and many more in the Caribbean have a long history of open rebellion against various colonial powers. The island of Haiti became the first successful slave rebellion, kicking out the French. In North America, Nat Turner's revolt, involving hundreds of slaves killing slave masters and their families, sent shockwaves throughout the South. Through the centuries-long history of colonial wars in the Americas, black slaves often pitted one colonial power against the other, a strategy to elevate their working and living conditions and sometimes to bargain for their complete freedom. Most historians, however, argue that most black slaves chose fugitivism. Escaping horrors of bondage by running away was a life-threatening gamble. If caught, punishment could be torturous and could potentially cost one's life. Nonetheless, countless slaves fled, sometimes seeking refuge in neighboring American Indian tribes, while others successfully built maroons, or settlements of escaped slaves, in the rugged mountainous areas and inaccessible swampy lowlands in the South. Most fled to the free North in record numbers as far as New York, Boston, and even Canada. The case of Bacon's rebellion complicates the dichotomy of race, where the poor and landless class of black slaves and whites actually unify and engage in warfare against the land-owning white upper class. In drawing the color line, Howard Zinn argues that the many cases of interracial uprisings by the lower classes resulted in the upper class instituting policies to widen the demarcation between black and white. The upper class many times won over lower class whites by granting firearm permits, parceling out larger parcels of land, and lowering taxes and tribute, for example, but denying these same rights and privileges to blacks. Surrounded by revolting American Indians and black slaves, the social constructs of whiteness bonded Europeans and their descendants across varying religious and cultural divides and laid the foundation for white supremacy, where poor whites felt psychologically superior to black slaves. Poor, landless whites thus began to identify themselves with upper-class whites, while rejecting any idea of a commonality with blacks or American Indians as an exploited laboring class. The extreme physical and psychological repercussions inflicted on rebellious black slaves resulted in a more common passive resistance. Organized work slowdowns, especially during planting and harvest time, or individuals breaking tools and playing dumb, oftentimes forced slave masters to negotiate working conditions and living conditions. This was not only a conscious and unconscious strategy to navigate and survive the horrors and indignities of bondage, but also underlined the demand that slave masters recognize black humanity and dignity even under slavery. Howard Zinn argues that slave masters could control external boundaries such as the physical location, work roles, diet, and shelter of slaves, but could not control the internal boundaries of black slave communities, such as friendships, love-formed kin groups, the rearing of children, the spiritual beliefs and practices, and organizing of leisure time. Black culture and identity emerged, the music, religion, language, and family structure, rooted in African culture under slave conditions in North America.